One ordinary morning, a black woman is wrongfully arrested by the police under unclear circumstances, simply because she matches the description of a suspect. As she's mistreated and humiliated in public, she refuses to back down and decides to call her brother, the U.S. Attorney General. The story takes a dramatic turn when he intervenes, turning the entire situation upside down. Will justice prevail, and will the officers face the consequences of their actions? Don't forget to subscribe and like for more powerful stories like this one. The coffee shop is busy with professionals getting their morning fix. A well-dressed woman in her early 30s steps inside, adjusts her leather handbag strap, and walks up to the counter. "A caramel macchiato, please." "To go." She pulls out her phone, scrolling through emails, her mind already on the long day ahead, meetings, case reviews, a civil rights lawsuit coming up. The barista starts on her order. Suddenly, a sharp voice cuts through the bustle. "Hey, stop right there." She looks up, confused. She assumes the voice isn't for her, but it comes again, more urgent. "I said, stop." She turns around to see two uniformed officers approaching, their hands resting on their belts, eyes hard. One is tall with a buzz cut, the other shorter, stockier, with a reddish beard. The air feels tense, the room seems to go quiet as the officers step forward. "Me? What's going on?" The taller officer steps forward, his expression stern and commanding. "You need to come with us. Now." She instinctively steps back but stays calm, trying to make sense of the situation. The people around her are watching, some looking confused, others curious. A few patrons lower their phones, sensing something is off. "What? Why?" The bearded officer grabs her wrist roughly, twisting it in a way that makes her wince, though she doesn't resist. "You match the description of a suspect we're looking for. You need to come with us." "A suspect? Are you kidding me? I just came in to get coffee." The bearded officer doesn't respond. He tightens his grip, pulling her toward the door. The taller officer pulls out his handcuffs, the sound of metal scraping against metal adding to the tension in the air. He speaks flatly. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult." Her stomach tightens as the eyes of everyone in the shop turn toward her. The whispers start immediately, a few patrons instinctively reaching for their phones to record the scene. The woman's mind races, but she remains still, determined to keep her composure. "You're making a mistake. I'm a lawyer. I know my rights." "What's the charge?" The bearded officer finally responds, his voice cold. "You fit the description of a suspect involved in a robbery this morning." "Robbery? Are you serious? I've been at home getting ready for work for the last 2 hours. This is a mistake." The taller officer's expression hardens as he steps closer. The bearded officer pulls her arm tighter, forcing her to move towards the door. "We'll sort it out at the station," the taller officer says, his tone dismissive. Her pulse races as she feels the cold steel of the handcuffs snap around her wrists. She exhales sharply, trying to calm herself. The pressure of the moment is suffocating, and she can feel the weight of the room on her, eyes watching, some with curiosity, others with disbelief. Several patrons are still filming, capturing the entire exchange. She looks around the room, feeling a mix of frustration and anger welling up inside. "Someone call my brother," she says, her voice steady, but with an edge. The bearded officer glances at her, smirking as he mutters under his breath. "Your brother can meet you downtown." The woman clenches her jaw, refusing to show any sign of weakness. "My brother is Malcolm Mitchell, the United States Attorney General." The officers freeze for a moment. The bearded officer's grip loosens on her wrist, and the taller officer looks at her, his confidence faltering. He glances at his partner, who seems to hesitate as well. The room falls silent, the tension palpable. The whispers stop. People watch closely, some waiting for a reaction. "That's supposed to mean something to us?" the taller officer asks, his voice laced with skepticism, but there's a hint of uncertainty now. "It means you just made the biggest mistake of your career." The officers exchange a quick, uncertain glance. The tall officer's face shifts, his confidence cracking. For the first time, they seem unsure. The woman stands tall, her gaze unwavering, as the officers process the weight of her words. The air between them is thick with tension, but she holds her ground, her silence speaking volumes. The whispers in the room begin again, louder now, as the reality of the situation begins to settle in. The officers, still processing her words, seem uncertain, but their authority doesn't waver. The woman stands firm, her wrists still cuffed tightly behind her as they escort her out of the coffee shop. The murmurs from the customers grow louder, their phones still recording the scene. The cold air of the early morning hits her face as the door swings open, the sounds of the city filling the silence that followed the tension inside. They walk toward the waiting squad car, the taller officer pushing her forward with a firm hand on her arm. The bearded officer walks behind, keeping a close watch. "Move it," the taller officer orders, but there's less force in his voice now, the earlier aggression replaced by hesitation. The woman doesn't look back at the crowd that gathers outside. Her focus is on the officers, on the unfolding injustice. She walks with purpose, her chin held high, her body tense but controlled. They reach the squad car, and the taller officer opens the door, shoving her inside without much consideration. The metal clangs as the door shuts behind her, and she's left in the back seat with only the sound of her own breathing and the faint buzz of the radio. Her pulse still races, but she doesn't let it show. The bearded officer leans in through the window, speaking to the driver in hushed tones, but she can hear their words clearly. "Take her downtown. We'll sort it out there." As the squad car starts moving, the woman watches the streets of the city pass by, the buildings blurring as they move further away from the coffee shop. The reality of the situation is setting in. She's being treated like a criminal, though she knows she's done nothing wrong. Her mind races. She could call her lawyer, but she needs to call someone else, someone who can end this madness quickly. She takes a deep breath, glancing at her phone on the seat next to her. She'll need to act fast. The car turns onto a main road, and she's jolted slightly as it speeds up. She shifts in her seat, testing the cuffs. There's no way to slip them off, but she tries to push away the rising sense of panic. As she adjusts herself in the back seat, the bearded officer glances over at her from the front seat, his gaze calculating. "You're really pushing it," he mutters. "You think your brother's gonna pull strings to get you out of this?" Her eyes narrow, meeting his in the rearview mirror. "I don't need him to pull strings," she says, her voice calm but firm. "I need you to stop this nonsense." He scoffs and turns back to the road, but she knows her words have landed. They don't seem as sure of themselves now. She isn't just some random woman they can walk all over. She has power, and she knows it. The tall officer, still driving, glances at her through the rearview mirror. "You're about to be booked for a robbery. How's that gonna look when your brother finds out? He's gonna be pissed." She doesn't flinch at the mention of her brother. Instead, she leans back in the seat and takes a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand. This wasn't just about clearing her name, it was about standing her ground. The officer continues to mumble, but she tunes him out. Her mind is already on the phone call she needs to make. She's been wronged, and it's time for that to end. A few minutes later, the car pulls up to the station. They stop in front of the entrance, the building looming in front of them. She doesn't make a move to get out. The taller officer opens the door. Out, he orders. The woman doesn't budge. I'm not going anywhere until I make a call. The officer's jaw clenches. Now. She gives him a cool, measured look, then slowly pulls her phone from her bag. Without breaking her gaze, she dials a number and holds the phone to her ear. The sound of ringing fills the silence, then the call is picked up. She waits, feeling the tension rising, but she keeps her expression steady. Malcolm, it's me. The car comes to a screeching halt in front of the police station. The sirens have stopped, but the tension in the air lingers as the officers turn to look at the woman in the back seat. She remains still, her face composed, the phone still pressed to her ear. Malcolm, it's me, she repeats, her voice steady, but with a clear undercurrent of urgency. There's a pause on the other end of the line. She can hear a shift in his voice, the calm yet authoritative tone that's always been there. What's going on? Where are you? The officers, visibly annoyed by the delay, exchange frustrated glances. The taller officer shifts his weight, pacing impatiently near the car door, while the bearded officer mutters something under his breath. I'm being detained at the station. They've got me in handcuffs for something I didn't do. She doesn't raise her voice, but there's an edge to her words now. I need you here, Malcolm. This needs to stop now. Her brother's response comes almost immediately, the steel of his voice cutting through the tension in the car. Stay calm. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't speak to anyone until I arrive. The woman hangs up, the phone slipping into her pocket as she keeps her gaze forward, deliberately ignoring the officers. Her chest rises and falls with a steady breath, her mind focused, already preparing for what will come next. The officers grow restless. The bearded officer glares at her in the rearview mirror, his discomfort growing with every passing second. You really think he can fix this? He sneers, his voice dripping with disdain. She doesn't answer. She just looks out the window, watching the station doors in front of her. Her thoughts are already on the next steps. This won't be over until they're held accountable. The tall officer slams the door open, the noise echoing in the quiet street. Out. Now. She doesn't respond immediately, waiting for the officer to lose his patience. When he grabs her arm and starts to pull her out, she stands up slowly, following his grip, but moving with quiet defiance. Her steps are firm but controlled as she walks toward the station doors. The bearded officer follows closely behind, grumbling under his breath. The tall officer stays a few paces ahead, leading the way with a firm hand on her back. She lets them push her through the station doors, but she holds her head high. No fear, no shame. Inside the station, the noise is different, a mix of low voices, ringing phones, and the occasional clatter of keys. A couple of officers glance in their direction as they pass by, but the attention is fleeting. They all know the routine. But none of them know what's coming. The tall officer leads her to a holding area. He gestures to the chair in front of a desk. Sit. She doesn't flinch. She sits down without a word, her body language clear, unmoved. The bearded officer stands at the door, his eyes never leaving her, trying to read her. The tall officer shuffles through some papers on the desk, mumbling something under his breath. He looks up at her finally, as if trying to catch her in a lie. Do you want to explain yourself now? He asks, his tone more mocking than genuine. She meets his gaze, her voice calm, unwavering. I'm not the one who needs to explain myself here. He scoffs, clearly frustrated, but the door behind them opens with a sudden sharpness. All three of them turn to face the new arrival. The woman doesn't need to look to know who it is. The tension shifts instantly, the weight of the moment dropping in the air. The tall officer's demeanor shifts from annoyance to confusion, then to fear as Malcolm walks in. His presence fills the room, the same authoritative yet composed air she's known her whole life. He doesn't look at anyone except the two officers. "Is this how you're treating citizens now?" he asks, his voice cutting through the room. "You've made a mistake. Let my sister go." The officers stand still, neither one daring to move. The bearded officer shifts uncomfortably, glancing at the tall officer, both of them suddenly unsure of what to do. The tension in the room is thick, the weight of their mistake hanging in the air. "She's been wrongfully detained," Malcolm continues, stepping closer. "And now, I'm demanding accountability." The tall officer hesitates for a moment before speaking, his voice suddenly small. "Sir, we thought she matched the description of a suspect." Malcolm cuts him off, his eyes cold and unwavering. "Save it. You've made your decision. Now, we deal with the consequences." The woman watches, her heart pounding but steady. She's been heard. Now, the story shifts. The room is silent after Malcolm's words hang in the air. The two officers stand still, their faces pale and uncertain. The weight of the situation presses down on them, and the tension is palpable. The woman sits motionless, her gaze never leaving the officers, who are now visibly nervous. Malcolm steps forward, his presence commanding as always, his eyes locked on the officers. "You've just detained an innocent woman based on a false assumption," he says, his voice low and controlled. "And now, you're going to make it right." The bearded officer shifts his weight uncomfortably, his fingers twitching near his belt. The taller officer glances nervously at his partner, unsure how to proceed. "You're just going to let her go?" the tall officer asks, his voice unsteady. Malcolm looks at him with cold eyes, unwavering. "Of course. But not before I make a few calls. Your actions today are about to become very public." The tall officer opens his mouth to respond but hesitates. He knows better than to challenge Malcolm now. The bearded officer steps forward, trying to regain control of the situation, though his voice is shaky. "We were just following protocol. We thought she matched the description of a suspect." Malcolm cuts him off with a sharp gesture. "You didn't do your job, and you didn't follow the proper procedure. The description you had didn't match. You didn't check her ID, didn't verify her whereabouts, and you didn't give her the benefit of the doubt. You assumed guilt." The woman watches them silently, her fists clenched, but she remains composed. Her brother's words are like a shield around her, and she knows this is just the beginning. They can't hide from their mistake any longer. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Malcolm continues, his voice firm. "You're about to feel the consequences of what you've done." The tall officer swallows hard, his face going pale. "Please, sir, we were just..." Malcolm holds up a hand, silencing him. "I don't care about your excuses. You will be held accountable for this, and I will make sure everyone knows about it. From the top down." The bearded officer's jaw tightens, but he doesn't say anything. He's stuck, caught in a moment where he can't escape the reality of his actions. "You have no idea how much trouble you're in," the woman says, breaking her silence. Her voice is steady but laced with an underlying fury. "You've violated my rights, humiliated me in front of people, and you don't even have the decency to apologize. You think this is over?" The officers look down, their faces growing even more uncertain as the woman's words hit hard. "I've spent my career fighting for justice," she continues. "And now, because of your ignorance and your disregard for the law, you're going to pay the price." Malcolm turns toward the officers, his eyes scanning them one last time before he addresses them directly. "I'm calling the mayor, the police chief, and the Department of Justice. You'll be suspended, and you'll face an investigation for misconduct. You'll be lucky if this doesn't escalate into a public scandal." The bearded officer starts to protest but falters under Malcolm's unwavering gaze. You don't have a say in this anymore. Your mistake is public now. You'll answer to those who have the authority to make sure this never happens again. The tall officer steps back, defeated, and his partner follows suit, both of them shrinking under the weight of the inevitable consequences. The woman stands up slowly, her posture resolute. Let me out of these cuffs, she says firmly. Now. The officers don't move immediately, but with a glance from Malcolm, they relent. The bearded officer pulls out the key, unlocking the cuffs with a reluctant click. She rubs her wrists, the tightness lingering, but the action brings her a small sense of victory. Malcolm steps toward her, placing a hand on her shoulder. We're leaving, he says, his voice strong and reassuring. You've done your part, and now it's time for them to answer for theirs. The woman nods, turning her back on the officers without another word. They've lost, and she's won. As they walk toward the door, the officers stay silent, their eyes following them out. The silence is deafening, the weight of their actions hanging heavily in the air. The woman doesn't look back. Outside, the world feels different now. Her brother's protection, her unwavering strength, and the justice she'll demand have shifted everything. But this is just the beginning. The cold air greets them as they step outside the station, the city bustling around them. The woman's wrists still sting from the cuffs, but she feels a rush of relief with each step she takes, walking beside her brother. The weight of what just happened begins to sink in, but she holds herself steady. The wrongness of it all hasn't gone away, but now she has the power to do something about it. Malcolm looks down at her, his expression softened but still serious. I'm proud of you, he says quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. She glances at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. I didn't have a choice, she replies. I couldn't let them get away with this. Malcolm nods, his eyes hardening once more as they approach his car. The two officers are still inside the station, undoubtedly processing the weight of what they'd done and how quickly things had shifted against them. As they reach the car, the woman takes a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension that's been building ever since the moment she was grabbed. She slides into the passenger seat, letting out a sigh. Malcolm starts the engine, and they drive off, heading toward the city center. He's quiet for a moment, his jaw clenched as if he's processing the entire ordeal, thinking through the next steps. Don't think this is over, he says, breaking the silence. This is just the start of what I'm going to do about it. I know, she replies, her voice resolute. But I want them held accountable. I want those officers to feel what it's like to have their rights stripped away. To have people watch them suffer the way they made me suffer. Malcolm glances at her, his lips tightening in agreement. I'm going to make sure they do. As they drive, the city streets blur by, but it feels like everything has slowed down. The normalcy of the world around them doesn't match the storm that's brewing in their lives. She's been wronged, humiliated in front of strangers, but now there's something bigger at play: justice, accountability, and a public reckoning. Have you thought about going public with this? Malcolm asks, his voice low. She doesn't hesitate. I've thought about it. I know how these things work. They try to bury the story, make it disappear. But I'm not going to let them. I'm going to make sure the world knows what happened to me. Malcolm nods. I'll get the press on this. We'll have the media follow up. And the department? They'll have no choice but to act. I'll get in touch with the mayor's office and the chief. This isn't just going to blow over. She feels a growing sense of purpose as she listens to him, his determination matching her own. They're not done. They're not walking away from this. They'll make sure the world hears their story, and they'll make sure those officers pay for what they've done. I'm with you, she says quietly, looking at him with unwavering trust. The car turns onto a quiet street, and for the first time since it all began, she feels a sense of control. This is their fight now. No longer just her own. Together, they're going to see it through. Malcolm pulls up to the curb in front of their building. He parks, but neither of them gets out immediately. The weight of the next step still lingers, but they're both ready for what's to come. "We do this right, and we change things for good," Malcolm says, his voice resolute. She nods, her resolve unshaken. "We will." They both get out of the car, the door shutting behind them with a finality. The fight isn't over. It's only just begun. The woman and her brother enter their apartment building, the door closing softly behind them. The hum of the city outside feels distant as they make their way upstairs. The stillness inside feels like a stark contrast to the whirlwind of the past few hours. As they walk down the hallway, Malcolm's phone buzzes in his pocket. He pulls it out, glancing at the screen, his expression unreadable. He stops in his tracks, taking a deep breath before answering. "Yes?" The woman waits beside him, her nerves still on edge, but she can't help but notice the change in Malcolm's demeanor as he listens. His jaw tightens, and his gaze hardens, but his voice remains calm. "Send them over," he says simply before hanging up. He turns to her, his eyes focused and sharp. "The mayor's office wants to meet with us. They're ready to talk." She nods, her heart picking up speed. She can feel the momentum building, but she knows this is just the beginning. "Are we going public now?" she asks, already knowing the answer. Her resolve has only grown stronger since the moment they left the station, but she needs to know exactly what the next move is. Malcolm looks at her with a slight, reassuring smile. "Not yet. We'll meet with the mayor first, but after that? We take this to the press. We control the narrative." He leads her into the living room, where they both sit down. He pulls out his laptop, beginning to type a quick message to his team. The woman watches him work, her mind racing with all the possibilities of what comes next. Malcolm looks up, his eyes filled with determination. "I need you to prepare a statement for the press. I want it clear, concise, and firm. Let them know exactly what happened, how they violated your rights, and how the public needs to know. But keep it professional. We're not giving them any way to dismiss this." She nods, taking out her phone and beginning to type. Each word she writes feels like an act of reclaiming control, a chance to speak out and hold those responsible accountable. Just as she finishes her draft, her phone rings. It's the press office from the mayor's office, confirming the time for the meeting. She gives the woman all the details, an hour from now. They're ready. "We're good to go," she says, standing up and grabbing her coat. Malcolm stands up too, grabbing his own jacket. "Let's make sure they know this isn't going away." They walk out together, the weight of what's to come hanging over them, but the fire of determination in their steps outweighs the uncertainty. Underscore 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 underscore. Int. Mayor's office, later. The mayor's office is sleek, modern, and imposing, with tall windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The woman and Malcolm sit at a long conference table, facing the mayor and a few of his aides. The tension in the air is palpable, and the silence is thick. Everyone knows why they're here. The mayor, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a well-tailored suit, looks at them carefully, his expression professional but guarded. His aides sit nearby, taking notes, ready to move forward. "Thank you for coming in today," the mayor says, his voice calm but measured. "I understand the gravity of the situation, and we're doing everything we can to address it." Malcolm leans forward slightly, his eyes unwavering. "Everything you can isn't enough. My sister was wrongfully detained, humiliated in front of strangers, and the officers responsible haven't even been held accountable yet. I need you to understand that this is not a small matter." The mayor nods slowly, acknowledging the seriousness in Malcolm's tone. "We've launched an internal investigation," he says, his hands clasped in front of him. "And we're reviewing the entire situation." "An internal investigation?" the woman asks, her voice calm but filled with frustration. "That's your response? You think an internal investigation is going to fix this? You're going to sweep it under the rug like you always do? It doesn't work that way anymore." The mayor's eyes flicker with the slightest sign of discomfort, but he doesn't respond immediately. He glances at his aides, then back at them. "I understand your frustration, but we have to follow protocol." Malcolm's voice grows more forceful, cutting through the mayor's words. "We're not interested in more delays. You want to keep your job, you need to fix this. You need to hold the officers accountable now. We're done waiting for protocol." The woman's eyes are locked on the mayor now, and she can feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. The room is silent, and the only sound is the tapping of a pen on the table as one of the aides nervously scribbles notes. Finally, the mayor speaks again, his tone a little more resigned. "We'll move forward with the public release of a statement. The officers involved will be put on leave until the investigation is complete. We're not going to sweep this under the rug. But you need to understand, this will take time." The woman stands, her voice sharp. "You've had plenty of time," she says. "And I'm not going to let you drag your feet on this. I'll go to the press with or without your statement." Malcolm gives her a subtle nod of approval, and the mayor, seeing the determination in their eyes, nods as well. "Understood. I'll make sure the statement is released today. And we'll work with you on making sure this never happens again." As they leave the room, the woman feels a small sense of relief. It's not a complete victory, but it's a step forward. They're starting to make noise, and the truth will come out. Malcolm turns to her as they step into the hallway. "This is just the beginning," he says, his voice filled with conviction. "They won't be able to hide." She nods, a new fire burning inside her. This fight is far from over, but she's ready to see it through. Int. News station, later that day. The lights of the newsroom are bright, the air buzzing with the urgency of an impending story. The woman and Malcolm sit in a small waiting room just outside the live studio, her heart beating a little faster now. She adjusts her blazer, trying to steady her nerves. Malcolm stands beside her, exuding a calm confidence, his presence grounding her. A producer walks in, smiling briefly before getting to the point. "We're ready for you both. The cameras are set up. We'll be live in 5 minutes." The woman takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation settle into her chest. This is it. The moment when her story goes public. The moment when the world will finally hear about the injustice she faced, and the officers who tried to sweep it all under the rug. Malcolm gives her a look, as if to say, "We've got this." She nods and stands up, following him into the studio. The set is sleek, with polished wooden floors and a large, modern desk at the center. The anchor, a professional-looking woman in her late 30s, stands up as they enter, her smile warm but professional. "Thank you for joining us on such short notice," the anchor says as they take their seats across from her. "We know this is a difficult situation, but your bravery in speaking out is going to make a difference." The woman nods, her throat tight but determined. Malcolm sits beside her, his calm presence a steady anchor. The producer gestures to the cameras, and the countdown begins. 5, 4, 3, 2. The lights flicker to life, and the studio fills with an artificial buzz. The anchor turns to face the camera. Good evening. Tonight, we have an exclusive story that has shaken the city. A wrongful arrest, an abuse of power, and a call for accountability. Here with us are the woman at the center of the controversy, who was detained under false pretenses, and her brother, a prominent figure in law enforcement. Please welcome, her name, and Malcolm Mitchell. The camera pans to the woman, who looks directly into the lens. Her jaw tightens, her posture straightens. This is her moment. The anchor continues, her voice measured but concerned. Her name, we understand you were wrongfully detained earlier today by 2 officers. Can you tell us exactly what happened? The woman looks at Malcolm for a brief moment, then turns back to the anchor. Her voice is steady but filled with emotion, the weight of everything that's happened in the past few hours threatening to break through. But she holds herself together. I was simply going to get coffee, like anyone else. But 2 officers stopped me, claiming I matched the description of a suspect involved in a robbery. They didn't tell me why I was being detained, and they didn't give me the opportunity to explain myself. I was humiliated in front of everyone in that coffee shop. I was treated like a criminal. The anchor nods, her face sympathetic. And after being detained, you called your brother, who is the U.S. Attorney General. What happened next? The woman's eyes lock with the camera, her voice growing firmer. My brother got involved, and the situation escalated. He demanded that the officers release me immediately, but it didn't stop there. We weren't just going to let this slide. We demanded accountability from the city's leadership, and now, the officers who wrongfully detained me are facing consequences. The anchor glances at Malcolm, who gives a subtle nod. Malcolm, you've been working tirelessly on this issue since it happened. Can you tell us what steps have been taken to ensure this doesn't happen again? Malcolm leans forward, his voice steady and authoritative. We're pushing for transparency. The officers involved have been suspended pending the investigation, and the mayor has promised to release a public statement, detailing the steps the department will take to prevent further abuse. This will not be swept under the rug. We're going to make sure there is lasting change. The woman turns to him, her eyes full of gratitude but also determination. She speaks directly to the camera, as if addressing the city. I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through today. This isn't just about me. This is about everyone who's been wrongfully treated, ignored, or punished because of bias. We have to do better. We need to make sure that people in power are held accountable when they misuse it. The anchor nods, clearly moved. Thank you both for being here tonight. Your courage is truly inspiring, and we'll continue to follow this story as it develops. We hope this sparks the conversation we all need to have about justice, accountability, and reform. As the camera cuts to a commercial break, the woman and Malcolm sit back in their chairs, the weight of the moment finally sinking in. It's done. They've gone public. The world knows now. Malcolm turns to her, his expression proud but with a glint of determination in his eyes. You did great, he says quietly. She looks at him, a small but resolute smile forming on her lips. We did great. They both stand, the energy in the studio shifting from tense anticipation to a quiet sense of victory. The battle is far from over, but tonight, they've made sure the world is watching. The air is crisp as crowds gather outside City Hall. The camera pans over the protesters, holding signs demanding justice and accountability for the wrongful arrest. The energy is palpable, voices unified, determined. The woman stands at the front of the crowd, Malcolm by her side. She looks out over the sea of people, feeling the weight of everything that's led her to this moment. A group of journalists surrounds her, microphones in hand, cameras rolling. Her heart beats steadily, her confidence unwavering as she steps up to the podium. Malcolm stands beside her, his expression serious but filled with pride. They've fought for this moment, and now, it's time for the final word. The crowd quiets as she steps up to the microphone. She takes a deep breath, and her voice rings out clear and strong. This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's been treated unfairly, anyone who's been silenced by those with power, anyone who's faced abuse of authority. I was wrongfully detained for nothing more than the color of my skin, and I won't stand for it. She pauses, looking out over the crowd, meeting the eyes of the protesters who stand with her. For too long, we've seen systemic injustice in our communities. We've seen those in power act with impunity. But today, we take a stand. We demand change, and we won't rest until we see it. We won't let anyone be treated the way I was, no more wrongful arrests, no more abuse of power. The crowd erupts in applause, a wave of support and agreement washing over her. She stands tall, proud of how far she's come. This battle isn't over, but today, they've made a significant impact. She looks at Malcolm, who gives her a slight nod, his eyes filled with admiration. This isn't just a victory for her, it's a victory for everyone who's faced injustice and been denied their rights. The officers who wronged me are being held accountable, she continues, her voice steady and fierce. And the mayor's office has promised reforms. But this is just the beginning. We will continue to fight for every person who's been unfairly targeted, every person whose rights have been violated. We will be their voice. The applause grows louder, the crowd's energy building with every word she speaks. Her fight has become their fight, and together, they'll push for the change that's long overdue. As the speech ends, the cameras click, capturing the historic moment. The woman steps back from the podium, her heart still racing, but filled with a sense of purpose. Malcolm steps beside her, and the two of them share a look, a silent understanding passing between them. This is only the beginning, but it's a start. They've made sure the world knows the truth, and they're not backing down. Underscore 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 ext City Hall later. As the protest begins to disperse, the woman and Malcolm stand on the steps of City Hall, watching the crowds begin to fade. But the change is palpable. The city feels different today, charged with the energy of a movement sparked by one woman's refusal to be silenced. Malcolm turns to her, a small, proud smile on his face. "You did it. We did it." She looks at him, a quiet smile forming on her lips. "We did. But we're not stopping here. We keep pushing. This is just the beginning." He nods, his expression serious. "We'll make sure they hear us. Every step of the way." As they walk away from the steps, side by side, the camera pulls back to reveal the city skyline in the distance. The sunlight glints off the buildings, the hope for change now burning brighter than ever.